working, yeah. Hello, good morning. So it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here today, talking with a community that studies and values the many dimensions of openness. This conference actually brings, and the conversations we've been having these 2 days, brings a central question for us all. Where do we stand with the open paradigm today? We are witnessing the AI gold rush for data. It's deeply impacting the principles of open data, open source, open infrastructure, and even the architecture of the internet itself. For the last 15 years, I've been navigating the data ecosystem in Brazil, across civil society, public sector, academia, and I've been collaborating with journalists, the private sector. And when I look back, I see a sequence that many here will maybe recognize. So first, we wanted to open data. Then we needed to improve the data. Then we worked to reuse it and create value, public value, out of it. And now, maybe, the data is being closed again. It's becoming interoperable for some. We talked about open banking, for instance, yesterday with Marcela Matiuso. Open in its format, but not truly accessible or available to everyone. There's a theory of waves in open data. Many of you may be familiar with it. There are different stages of openness that emerge and coexist. Some say the AI is bringing the 4th wave. But what I see doesn't really feel like a wave. It feels more like a backwash. The moment when the previous waves are receding and the shoreline is reshaping. So let me share some episodes of my work and my as a researcher, as a practitioner in this field, to maybe illustrate that point. So episode 1, the peak of the open data promise. In 2013, Brazil had just recently enacted its Freedom of Information law. I was part of this team that won the first place in a Ministry of Education hackathon in Brazil. The challenge was to help open and make sense of national education census microdata. We wanted to enable civil society and researchers to reuse and improve those massive data sets published for the first time. You may also have caught this hackathon fever back then. The promises of open data had never been so close to coming through by that time. Now, fast forward to 2022. We had 9 years of public value generated by journalists, researchers, policymakers, and the private sector. Anyway, the institute responsible for the data under the Bolsonaro government suspended the release of this microdata, claiming privacy risks. They were anonymized, of course, but the government commissioned a study that they commissioned argued that the data carried high re-identification risks if someone had enough resources to do it, right? There was a new context. Brazil data protection law, inspired by the European GDPR, had been approved in 2018. With low effort, the government could have implemented stronger privacy measures while preserving the benefits of open microdata, but they didn't. Elections came, a more democratic government took office. A court decided just maybe a month ago that this data set should be open. Anyway, they're still closed. Open Knowledge Brazil, I know that they are about to launch a report on the potential public loss, the potential public value that we lost. And the civil society is still fighting to restore access. Meanwhile, in 2023, at least one private company gained access to the database and started selling search services to school using that very data. It used a mechanism only intended for researchers. You know that the secret rooms, not journalists, not NGOs, certainly not private companies. Actually, not secrecy rooms. They're another data enclave, maybe in English is the proper term. So a private company access a data enclave and starts selling. So the value of these data sets were artificially increased, right, for some. But the data didn't disappear. It was there. The access became a privilege, generating value for a few, and not necessarily a public value. Now, episode 2. In 2021, when I was the executive director of the Open Knowledge Brazil, we launched this Dear Diary, Querido Diário. It's a platform that collects hundreds of municipal gazettes every day and converts them to PDF, from PDF to an open format. With it, anyone can easily access and search for previously scattered official municipal records through a user-friendly interface. Other services from civil society and even for the public sector started relying on it via an API, open and free API. It has been recognized, though, by the way, by the Digital Public Good and the Digital Public Goods Alliance and the DPGA registry. So it's a digital public good. We built it in the first place because despite the advances we had in the federal government with open data, the local level in Brazil remains an unfulfilled promise, as in many places, data never became really open. Brazil is a deeply unequal country with 1,500 municipalities, and most of them are very poorly managed. Oh, this is a screenshot from our open data index for cities in Brazil that showed these extensive data deserts, even in Brazil capital cities. It was 2 years ago. So running a civil society open source project isn't easy in itself, it's a challenge. But now this receding wave of openness brings a new threat to this kind of project. Will scrapers like the ones in Querido Diário survive the automated anti-bot measures triggered by AI massive data extraction? Cloudflare, which handles roughly 20% of global internet traffic. By the way, yesterday was a good day for testing these numbers because many of us had our websites and services out of services because of them. Recently announced that it's blocking AI scrapers by default. At the same time, we see a growing data consolidation. Some companies will buy previously open platforms with huge data assets. Think Microsoft acquiring GitHub and then offering generative AI coding services. Some platforms sign exclusive deals for access to user-generated data. Think of Reddit's deal with Google. Again, the data hasn't vanished. It still generates value, not openly and not for everyone. And finally, episode 3. We are now 2020, since 2020 at the InternetLab. We have partners like Asmina and Núcleo. We've been running this Monitora, which is an observatory of online gender-based violence against women candidates during election cycles in Brazil. We've been doing that each election cycle since 2020. At this point, you already know where I'm going with this. We have elections next year. The project is struggling because the platform data is simply not available anymore. Since Twitter was bought by the guy you know, the API is too expensive for researchers. Meta shut down many of its analysis dashboards and tools, granting data access for researchers at, well-resourced universities and centers, not for a small research center in Brazil. The European Union's DSA includes provisions for research access, you know, the Article 40, but these conditions are far from being replicated or enforced in places like Brazil. But even in EU, you've been talking about that as well, the European Union hasn't figured out yet how to fully implement this provision. Anyway, journalists and NGOs, independent research centers, are probably going to be cut out. Again, the data hasn't been closed, not erased. It's going somewhere. Where? So large AI companies have fenced off and consumed all the data they could. Now they're trying to expand their frontier to places where data is abundant but traditionally hard to access. Governments. Governments' data is typically siloed. It can be a good thing. It's generally something we complain about, but it can be a safeguard. It's usually protected. But when that same guy, you know, was in charge of the DOGE department in the United States, they didn't try to open government data, but to ensure his team had unrestricted access even to sensitive and personal data. A few months later, his company announced a new product, Grok for Government, which was optimized specifically for the US government. Trained with what data, we may ask? We may never know, we can guess, since training data sets are rarely disclosed, but the question remains. Who actually benefits from data centralization and aggregation in governments? Then comes to the story, the digital public infrastructures. DPIs, as they are called, has become a central agenda, especially in the Global South. Countries like India and Brazil, now South Africa, and institutions like the G20, the UN, they promote interoperable, frictionless data systems. Private foundations are funding and promoting them. And the idea of public value is central to the DPIs. But it's very necessary to ask, who will benefit? Under what governance? With what safeguards? This is the moment of adoption of the DPIs, when these infrastructures are still being shaped. This is when transparency, participation, accountability matters the most. There's no recipe for DPIs, I must say, and we should be wary of those selling one. But here we can do something as researchers and practitioners. So what can the researcher community do? What do we do at this moment when openness itself is being redefined, infrastructures are being redesigned, and access to data is becoming increasingly uneven? Well, first, we need to go beyond purely technical analysis or definitions, right? Renata was yesterday talking about the idea of rediscussing the open definition with some new standards and going beyond the technical definitions that are in place for quite some time. It's not a matter of buttons to push. Understanding data flows within DPIs, and the incentives behind them require interdisciplinary alliances. On top of technical expertise, we need insights from law, from political economy, public administration, sociology, who knows what else. No single discipline can grasp these systems and in the interests underlying them. Second, we need methodological innovation. These infrastructures are not easily observable. So APIs close, documentation disappears, access becomes selective, as we discussed. Contracts that document who gets what may be hard to access. So researchers must develop new ways to study black box systems, map data journeys and flows, and restructure infrastructures from partial signals. As a researcher, I try to do this with the digital infrastructure for public transportation card in São Paulo. It's a huge infrastructure for 30 million users and various data leakages in the past years. Now at InternetLab, we are starting a research project to map the DPI for social welfare programs in Brazil. Together with a research institute in South Africa, we are going to do this comparative study. And we are going to do that from the outside, like the classic cartographers, right? We have to try to grasp the infrastructure. Third, we must help clarify concepts that are shaping policy. DPI is a mostly new concept. It's officially appeared in the arena of public debate from the debates in India when India was in the G20 presidency. I did a literature review, and it started appearing really like a concept, digital public infrastructure, not just a coincidental concept in the words coinciding in the same phrase. It really started to appear after G20 in India. So it's a new concept, but since it's been circulating, it has become very elastic. Like any useful term that becomes a buzzword. So I attended the DPI summit a couple of weeks ago in Cape Town, and I asked the members of a panel, what exactly is open about DPI? Because even though open is not in the definition itself, open appears as a buzzword or as an empty concept in the conversations, right? So each panelist gave a completely different answer. The access is open, or interoperability is what is open about DPI, or the code openness. So each one had something in mind. This conceptual ambiguity matters because it shapes regulation, it shapes funding and public expectations about these infrastructures. So the research community can and must make these definitions sharper. Fourth, we need to design actionable governance frameworks and architectures. To avoid being merely aspirational, frameworks should incorporate social and policy realities. State capacity. Yesterday, Luca Belli was mentioning PIX, and he said, wow, the secret sauce of PIX is institutional capacity, right? Without the institutional capacity of the central bank, it wouldn't exist. Actually, the team that is managing PIX is not that large. You would think that a team that is managing a huge infrastructure like that is big. It's not that big. They are struggling for more resources, but it's true. It's the institutional capacity is the fact that there was a team there that was capable of developing in-house such an infrastructure. This is the institutional capacity. So how can we strengthen our institutions to have this institutional capacity? And how can we put this institutional capacity in the equation when we are thinking about governance and governance frameworks, not from a simply theoretical point of view? So beyond state capacity, the institutional constraints, the political disputes, the inequalities of Global South, transparency and accountability must be built into the infrastructure itself, not as afterthoughts and pleas, not just rhetoric. And we need functional architectures with social technical features that are privacy respecting and at the same time are capable of delivering efficient public services. Also the success of PIX, right? It was free and it was effective. It really worked. Finally, we need to insist that openness is not merely a technical feature. There's a fifth slide missing here. It's not a button to push, as I said, it's a governance principle. It requires proactive design choices, institutional commitments, and mechanisms for participation. In Brazil, for instance, we have many participation committees and instances already functioning, but they are not really articulated or mobilized in this kind of implementation, of technical implementation. They can have a say in what government is building with the users' data or citizens' data, right? So this open paradigm we are discussing must be rebuilt not as nostalgia for a previous era, but as a forward-looking strategy for democratic digital futures. So this is the crossroads, right? It's a moment when data is more abundant than ever. And yesterday someone talked about scarcity, because it's yet increasingly inaccessible. When infrastructures promise interoperability while producing new forms of dependency, depending on how they are built, and when openness is celebrated in rhetoric but constrained in practice. So this is the invitation I extend to you, researchers, practitioners, to engage deeply, critically, collaboratively, to look not only at what the systems enable, but also at what they obscure. Not only the value they generate, but also who can generate that value and who gets excluded from that. To look at the infrastructures themselves, okay, but the politics and the economics surrounding them, or even capturing them. So this wave may be receding, but the ocean is still there. Let's finish in a positive note, because there are so many ideas being tested for democratic governance, data commons, participatory processes, community-driven digital public goods. They aim to generate public value from the many, not the few. So we can still shape what comes next. This community can help shape what comes next. So this is it. Thank you. I'm open to any questions, and I'd love to hear what you have to say on all that. Thank you.